And welcome to this edition of Learning Lab Live. So this is week 2 of our sessions where we will be sharing with you medically enhanced based product. And the importance of asking the right medical questions. So you're watching this because you've requested an on-demand session, as perhaps you weren't able to attend one of the live sessions. So I'm now going to share my screen with you. So just bear with me a second. Here we go, and we'll just put that into presenter view. So, welcome everybody. First and foremost, we will start this session by looking at our range of modern lending solutions. So we believe that we've actually got a solution to be able to fit most clients that you're actually looking at. So as it stands at this moment in time, we have got 5 products that sit within our range. So whether you are looking for a competitively lower rate, following with a lower loan to value, or even a higher loan to value, which we're being asked about an awful lot at this moment in time, or something that sits in the middle, then we've got something for you. So commonly we talk about the power of the panel, and the real importance with this is each of these products are funded by a different funder, and what that means is they all come with their own criteria. So it's a little bit like having almost 5 different lenders all under one roof offering slightly sort of different solutions to your customer. Now, if we look at this, obviously what we're considering here today is our tailored enhanced product and the tailored range. So within the tailored range, we've got 2 products that sort of sit within. So the tailored lifestyle and then the tailored enhanced. And what we'll do here is we'll look to lend up to 54% loan to value. Now, you're possibly looking at this chart and saying, well, hang on a minute. Capital Choice is there displaying 55% LTV. Why is tailored better? And the difference here is that in order to qualify for 55% loan to value on Capital Choice, you have to be a much older customer, whereas on the tailored range, you only have to be age 75. So you can get more borrowing at a much lower age. Now, with all of our products, the features are automatically built in. So you don't have to think about actually adding them or bolting them on. So each of our products come with the option of making a partial repayment, and that can be done in the form of a check. So we still do get checks every single month. It can actually be carried out over the phone by making a payment with a debit card, or alternatively, the client can actually set up a standing order. And the ability to overpay by 10% is there on every product, with the exception of Maxi, and Maxi Choice allows a 12% overpayment, okay? And that's all without early repayment charges. And when it comes to early repayment charges on each of our products, they're all fixed, so you know exactly where you stand at any point in time. Now, we also include what we call our compassionate window within this. So what this does is it allows a couple who are applying a facility that when either sadly one of them should either pass away or move into long-term care, we will give the remaining party the ability to repay the loan ERC free within a 3-year period. And where we found that exceptionally useful, we had a customer who purchased a property using an equity release, and it was in a village location. And of this couple, he was the driver of the 2 and she didn't drive at all. A little way down the line, unfortunately, Mr. sadly passed away, and the remaining lady was in a situation where she was having to get the bus, which didn't come very often, so maybe once or twice a week. So she was finding she was having to pay for taxis to go into town. So she said to her advisor, I would really love to port my mortgage onto a property close to the town so I don't have to travel. And at that point in time, rates had been on the decline. And he said, well, why do you want to do that? Actually, you can repay your mortgage ERC free, sell your house, repay the mortgage, and then actually have another mortgage, so take out a new equity release because the rates are much lower at this moment in time. So you've got the benefit of having that compassionate 3-year window that's on your side, and that's what they did, and it worked out really well for them. Downsizing protection is also built in as well. So the only product it isn't available on is the tailored range. Okay, it's available on everything else, and that would kick in after 5 years should the client actually want to move to a property that we wouldn't look to lend on. For example, a a log cabin in the woods, which would just be unmortgageable, a park home, or even an over 55. So an age restricted accommodation is something we wouldn't lend on. So let's look at specifically the tailored range. So we will look to lend on properties that start at £70,000, unless that's an ex-local authority house or bungalow, in which case that would be 100,000. And then we've got up to 54% loan to value and loan size of up to 800,000. We'll lend up to age 55 to 85. And then this product has changed quite dramatically since it's come back, and we're now offering a 5% cashback option within the range as well. Now, just a couple of things to think about here. So just to set the scene. So as a nation, we're living longer, but we're actually living longer ill. And that's because of the many advances in medical technologies, early stage detection. There's lots of things that are very much on our side. And what killed us 50 years ago no longer does, it just becomes a managed condition. So back in 2003, the Oxford Health Alliance actually carried out a study. And what that study revealed and came back with was something called 3-4-50. So there are 3 risk factors in life that are responsible for 4 non-communicative diseases that are responsible for 50% of global death. So those 3 risk factors were lack of exercise, poor diet, and smoking, that are responsible for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and chronic lung diseases, which are responsible for 50% of global death. And that was a while ago. So since then, the Oxford Health Alliance have revisited that study and have now come back with 4-4-60. So the additional risk factor is alcohol consumption. The non-communicative diseases haven't changed, but they are now responsible for 60% of global death. So that's a nice cheery fact for you. However, how does that transpire into the UK and what we see here? So there's lots of different sort of health factors and lifestyle conditions that can be considered. But if we have a look at some of the common ones that actually might be eligible for your client to actually get this enhanced plan. So we know that 6.4 million people within the population of the UK actually smoke, and being a smoker would give rise to a potential enhancement on this product. I'd like you to have a think about sort of how often somebody in the UK might actually be diagnosed with cancer. So how often do you think somebody is diagnosed with cancer? I'll let you have a little think about that. The answer to that is 90 seconds, every 90 seconds. So we know that 5 million people within the UK are diagnosed with diabetes, and an estimated 1 in 3 people have high blood pressure in the UK. Now, these people don't wear a badge that says, "Hi, I've got high blood pressure or diabetes." Okay, that's a condition that is managed. That is a condition that they will take drugs for on a day-to-day basis, and they will have that condition sort of monitored. So whether it be a HbA1c reading or their blood pressure monitored every so often, people don't think of these as illnesses, and it is almost the perception versus reality. Another thing for you to think about is what percentage of adults aged 18 or over in England, so just England, were estimated to be either overweight or living with obesity. What percentage of adults would you think would qualify into that category? So we're looking at nearly 64% there. We know that over 1.3 million people within the UK have had a stroke, and we know that 7.6 million people are living with a heart or a circulatory disease. And basically 130,000 people are living with MS, with nearly 6,700 people newly diagnosed each year. So that brings me back to the point of perception versus reality. So we know that when it comes to medical conditions, particularly in financial services, customers really don't like revealing what is wrong with them because they think it will have a negative impact on the situation. if any of you out there have actually ever sold life cover, critical illness cover, we know that that will have an impact. So from that perspective, it's really important that we understand a client's sort of medical situation by asking specific questions. But even more important is actually the way that we actually sort of pitch this to them in the first place, so they have an understanding of why we're asking the questions. This is where perception versus reality comes in. So I want to tell you about a life situation, and this is about my own father. So my father is 78 years old, and in 2010, he was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor. He had traditional craniotomy to have the tumor removed, and as a result, he had to learn to speak again, and he had to learn to write again. So he went into speech therapy for a year. And if you spoke to him today, you might think he'd had a stroke, and his speech will never improve beyond where it is now. Around 2 to 3 years later, he was diagnosed with stage 2 bowel cancer. He had the bowel cancer cut out and the bowel stitched back together, and he then had 6 months worth of chemotherapy, of which he completed 3. In 2019, he had a mouth ulcer that came and would not go away. So he scrubbed it with a toothbrush and it bled, and then it wouldn't heal. So he went to the dentist, who sent him to the doctor, who sent him to the hospital, and they said, "We believe this to be mouth cancer." It actually turned out to be stage 4 mouth cancer. It had gone from the inside of the mouth into the jawbone, into his lymph. On the initial CT scan, where they established this, it wasn't in his lymph, and it actually had travelled there between that scan and the operation, which was actually a very short space of time. So he then had to have 6 weeks of radiotherapy every day for sort of 6 weeks. And then that took us to the end of 2019. So we're now coming into 2020. And at that point, he's starting to feel a little bit better than perhaps he was. And then along came COVID. And it was very much a case of, "You, sir, you have to stay put now, and you have to shield for 12 weeks, which he wasn't very happy about. So during the COVID period, because he wasn't moving about so much, his mobility really started to suffer, and it did become kind of quite a problem. So he'd always been quite an active person, an active man. Now he was having to walk with a stick. He couldn't walk very far. In the last 12 months, he has had a pacemaker fitted, a prostate reduction, and 2 brand new hips. He also has macular degeneration and has to have injections into his eyes quite regularly. So I said to him, "Actually, Dad, this is about 3 weeks after the first hip was replaced." I said, "I'm actually using you in my presentations at work," which he seemed quite pleased about, actually. And he said, "Oh, right, okay." And I said, "How are you?" "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." And I said, "Do you consider yourself to be in good health?" "Yep, I'm absolutely fine." So here comes the perception versus reality piece. And we get a lot of people that come to us to say, "I'm looking for maximum borrowing from my customer." We then ask, "Have you asked the medical questions?" And the answer is, "Oh, no, they're in good health." And it's really important, and you can see there, from that situation with my own father, sort of how important it is that we ask direct questions around the subject matter. So by answering the 13 questions that we have within our questionnaire, that could actually potentially lead to a health rating, which will then return basically back from the API with a loan to value. Now, the first 2 questions are height and weight, so we're looking for BMI, and the second 2 after that are around smoking. The remaining 9 are effectively around medical conditions, exception of 1, which is, have you retired on the grounds of ill health? So the other 8 questions are very, very specific in terms of heart attack, cancer, stroke, Parkinson's, and multiple sclerosis. And it is a case of, have you ever? So the questionnaire doesn't say the word ever, but it is, have you ever been diagnosed with these conditions? And if you have something that's more severe, like one of those particular conditions, we would recommend that you get a consultant's letter from the client. And I will explain why in a second. Now, the other thing is thinking about somebody that might have had a heart attack 10 years ago, okay? They would have potentially forgotten all about it. They're living their life on a day-to-day basis. It hasn't been a problem for them. So ultimately, have you ever, has it ever happened in your lifetime? The other conditions, angina, diabetes, and also high blood pressure that would require medication, get a copy of the client's prescriptions for those. But like I said, nobody wears a badge and says, I have this condition. It just becomes managed and they don't even see it as an illness. So once the case has been written and then you send that in, that goes to our pre-offer team, and what they will do is instruct the valuation. So that will get done at the same time. If we've got the signed medical declaration on the case, then we will send that to the funder, because we don't underwrite this, the funder does. Okay. So I'll come back to now the consultant's letters and the prescriptions. If you can get those from the customer, please do so and attach them to the file with the medical declaration, and we will then send them on to the funder, because if the funder can underwrite from them, then they will. There will be certain cases where we do have to go for GPR, but we're working on a much different system now. It's all online and automated, and therefore it works a lot faster than it used to. Once the reports are back, or once the prescriptions or the consultant's letters are in and they're enough, then basically the funder will underwrite the case, and they will either they will approve the pre-rated product, or they will basically re-rate it. So if the client basically has told us yes to everything and their GP report suggests otherwise, then from that point of view, we're obviously going to re-rate it sort of, downwards. So if there's things they've forgotten about that would actually qualify, then actually they would re-rate in an upwards way. To be honest with you, don't really see cases that fall into re-rating at all. So this is a case study example. This is a real life case where a broker came to us and said, I've got a 59-year-old client that can borrow 58,000, but it's not enough. Can we get any more borrowing in any way, shape or form? So that followed with, have you asked the medical questions? The answer was no. So the broker went away, asked the medical questions, found out that the client had got high blood pressure and had previously had cancer. And that meant that he could get another £68,000, so another £10,000 upon what he could borrow initially. And the best thing about this was, at the time, the rate was actually cheaper than the initial rate that he'd also been offered. So it was a win-win situation for the customer. However, I want to pose a question to you at this point. So if we have got a couple, okay, and let's say that Mr. is the younger life and Mrs. is the older life. Mr. has got some health issues, but actually so does Mrs. Would you think that Mrs.'s health issues, because she's the older life, would actually give rise to any additional borrowing at all? So just want you to think about that for a moment. Do you think actually we're working only on the younger life, or will that older life actually add anything, any value to the case at all from an additional borrowing perspective? So here's the case study that we're looking at here. So a 65-year-old male and a 69-year-old female. 550,000 pound property and looking for maximum release possible. So Mr. has got a high BMI, he's got high blood pressure and diabetes. And basically, given that the older Mrs. is older, then basically the advisor in this instance didn't ask Mrs. Smith about her health. So what came back? So they could borrow 212,850 on the tailored lifestyle range and the tailored choice range. So however, the enhanced product, okay, albeit the client did qualify, was only giving 198,000. But when the broker went back and actually asked Mrs. Smith whether she could answer yes to any of the questions, he discovered that actually she'd previously suffered from cancer, and what that gave them was a borrowing of 230,600. So that's £39,000 more than Tailored Enhanced was offering in the first instance, and a real good chunk on top of what they've been offered from the Tailored Choice and Lifestyle range. So the moral of the story there is, please make sure that you're always asking both lives the answers to the medical questions, and please always input them into the system. And when you do this, basically, so whether you're using Air or whether you're using Iris, okay, it will return through our FastPass through an API to give you the rate and the loan to value that would be available for that customer based on how they've answered the medical questions. So as a lender, we're very much here to support you as the advisor, and we do realise that of late, cases and properties have been more complicated than they've ever been for whatever reason. So just to give you some criteria highlights here. So within the tailored range, okay, we will consider up to 100% flat roof. We will also look at shared septic tanks. All we need to know here is how many properties is the shared septic tank shared between, and is there a maintenance agreement in place, and is the actual tank, is it on the subject property, okay, or is it on one of the other properties? So we just need to understand the details behind that. We will also look up to 2 lodgers, including on government rent-a-room scheme. There's varying sets of adverse credit that we can take. It's not unlimited. There are limits within this, but we will consider that. And you also can use the loan to repay any unsatisfied county court judgments, IVAs, or debt management plans. This is our only plan where we allow an annex to be used as an Airbnb as well. So that's also quite exclusive. We will end up to 10 acres of land, where there is 10 acres of land, but we will only value 5. We will consider applications where there are solar panels, so whether they are leased or whether they are owned. And if they are leased, we do have to see the lease agreement. We'll also consider varying construction types as well, including crosswall, cob properties, and also wimpy no fines, along with a host of others. So if at all you're ever stuck sort of, from an underwriting point of view, and you are just unsure about any of the things we've discussed there, including things like unadopted roads or leasehold flat scenarios, because they can be really, really quite complicated, then you can either call us on the 03454 number, or alternatively, you can send us an email to info@moretolife.co.uk. But that about brings us to the end of our session. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching. We hope you found this informative. If you do have any questions, then please do get in contact with us. And thank you very much for this afternoon. Thank you.